They're called ancient artifacts, but they don't sit quietly. Crocodile mummies locked in tombs, streets mapped in perfect order in a city with no voice. Letters from ancient women never meant to survive, gold forged into antlers and trees, worn by kings or shamans, or both. A mansion of myth frozen in ash, a mountain city erased from memory, and stone circles that track the sun yet speak in riddles. These aren't legends, they're real, but their meanings are fading. Some civilizations left us libraries, these left us mysteries. 7 places, 7 puzzles, from Egypt to Korea, from desert rings to vanished cities. What were they trying to tell us? This isn't a timeline. It's a search for meaning, buried in bones, in brick and gold. And sometimes, the deeper we dig, the more we realize just how little we know. Let's begin, here on Riddle Me This Mysteries. They were buried beneath a god's feet, not in grand tombs or marked shrines, but in a hidden chamber beneath the temple of Kom Ombo, sealed beneath centuries of stone and sand. When archaeologists finally reached it, they didn't find human remains or treasure. Instead, they uncovered a congregation of the dead. Over 300 mummified crocodiles, some over 12 feet, 3.7 meters long, others barely a foot. Hatchlings curled beside their mothers. And in one case, as revealed in 2024 by CT scan, the remains of a fish still sat inside a crocodile's stomach, complete with a bronze hook embedded in its gut. It had died mid-meal. Who caught this creature? Who prepared its body with such care? And why were its kind gathered here, so many, so silently? The Temple of Kom Ombo, situated along a bend of the Nile in southern Egypt, was constructed around 180 BCE under Ptolemy VI Philometor during Egypt's Ptolemaic era. It's one of the few known temples dedicated to 2 deities: Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of fertility, strength, and the Nile, and Haroeris, a form of Horus. But the deeper one goes into the structure, the clearer it becomes. Kom Ombo belongs to Sobek. And Sobek, it seems, demanded much. The crocodile mummies were likely buried between 180 BCE and 200 CE, a period when animal cults flourished and temple priests wielded immense social and economic influence. But not all the practices began here. Recent excavations at Kubat al-Hawa near Aswan revealed 10 crocodile mummies in a rock-cut tomb dated to as early as 500–300 BCE. These older specimens, buried in palm leaves and rope, lacked resin or linen, offering a glimpse into the evolution of crocodile mummification over the centuries. At Kom Ombo, mummification became more elaborate and standardized. Yet surprisingly, Connecticut scans show that many crocodiles were not eviscerated. They were mummified whole, organs, bones, and sometimes even unborn embryos intact. Some were wrapped in linen, others left exposed. Resin was poured into a few mouths, likely part of a ritual to imbue them with divine breath. And strikingly, scans revealed 2 different species: the Nile crocodile, Crocodilus niloticus, and the now extinct West African crocodile, Crocodilus sucus. Whether this choice was symbolic or simply regional sourcing remains unclear. But the most haunting discovery may be the fishhook. Found in 2024 using advanced CT imaging, it was embedded in the digestive tract of a large specimen. It wasn't merely an offering, it was hunted, and not alone. Studies since 2019 have shown signs of blunt force trauma to the skulls of several crocodiles, suggesting they were captured in the wild and killed deliberately, not bred in temple ponds as once believed. This rewrites our assumptions. Kom Ombo's priests didn't just venerate crocodiles. They controlled them ritually, physically, and symbolically. This raises deeper questions. Was Sobek's power renewed through each death? Were pregnant crocodiles, some buried with their unborn, seen as fertility icons? Did these animals serve as avatars of divine life, slain to prolong Sobek's presence in the world? What's clear is that Kom Ombo was not a public shrine. The crocodile mummies were buried in a sealed subterranean vault, not displayed or offered in open chapels. Their location implies secrecy, restricted priestly access, and a highly organized operation. This wasn't faith expressed in broad daylight. It was ritual economy, myth-turned institution, hidden beneath the temple itself. Today, many of these remains are on display in the Kom Ombo Crocodile Museum, opened in 2012 and expanded to showcase the newest finds. Visitors can stand face-to-face with beasts that once symbolized creation, chaos, and kingship, all in one. Yet despite scans, species lists, and resin analysis, no texts explain the burial chamber. No record tells us why they were placed where they were or what rituals were performed above their heads. The gods are silent, the priests are gone, and the crocodiles, though preserved, keep their secrets. But the silence is familiar. Eastward, in a city of ordered streets and gleaming baths, another mystery lingers, not buried but emptied. No scrolls, no scripts, just drains that still work and walls that never spoke. No kings, no palaces, no armies, just walls, wells, and perfect right angles, mapped in sun-dried brick, not in myth. Mohenjo-daro was a city built not for war, but for water, and then it vanished. Rising from the banks of the Indus River, in what is now southern Pakistan, Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, flourished between 2600 and 1900 BCE. At its height, it was among the most advanced urban centers in the world. Only about 1/3 of its total area, roughly 80 hectares, 200 acres, has been excavated. Yet even this fragment reveals a metropolis of staggering precision. Its streets run in a perfect grid. Brick-paved roads intersect at right angles, lined with multi-story homes, each with its own drainage chute. The city contained over 700 wells, more than any other ancient city of its size, and many houses had private bathing areas connected to a functioning sewer system. At the heart of Mohenjo-daro stands the Great Bath, one of the earliest known public water structures on Earth. Measuring around 40 by 23 feet, 12 meters by 7 meters, and nearly 8 feet, 2.4 meters deep, its thick brick walls were sealed with bitumen to prevent leakage. Scholars believe it may have served religious or civic purposes, but no inscriptions survive to explain it. And therein lies the true enigma. Mohenjo-daro left behind no readable texts. Thousands of artifacts have been found: pottery, tools, ornaments, toys, and more than 5,000 inscriptions carved on seals, tablets, and pottery shards. These inscriptions, made up of strange symbols and animal motifs, form what we now call the Indus script, a language that has defied every attempt at decipherment. Some inscriptions contain as few as 3 characters, others stretch to over 20. Yet nowhere do we find a bilingual Rosetta Stone, nor any long-form writings. The people of Mohenjo-daro built one of the most sophisticated cities of the ancient world, and told us nothing of who they were. In recent years, that silence has been challenged. In 2024 and 2025, researchers using AI-based pattern recognition and clustering algorithms uncovered structural patterns in the Indus script. Some believe this suggests a phonetic or proto-alphabetic system, rather than a purely symbolic one. Others note visual parallels with Tibetan and Yi scripts, hinting, cautiously, at forgotten cultural links across early Asia. Still, the symbols remain unbroken. Every theory, no matter how compelling, ends in silence. And into that silence, fiction has poured. Over the past century, Mohenjo-daro has inspired a string of pseudo-scientific theories. Some claim the city was destroyed by a nuclear blast, citing radioactive skeletons and vitrified walls. Others point to alien intervention, or link the site to mythical lost continents like Atlantis or Lemuria. These claims, while dramatic, collapse under scrutiny. There is no evidence of radiation beyond natural background levels. No signs of a blast crater. The bricks are sun-baked, not vitrified. And the skeletons? They show no trauma. Most were buried over time, not felled in a single cataclysm. These aren't forbidden truths. They're distractions. The real mystery is far more compelling. How did a civilization capable of such architectural precision and civic planning disappear so quietly? There are no signs of invasion or fire. The decline of Mohenjo-daro appears gradual, likely driven by a combination of climate change, river shifts, and economic decentralization. As the Indus River changed course, the city's lifeline may have simply dried up. By 1900 BCE, Mohenjo-daro was already fading from memory. Yet it was never entirely forgotten. In 2024, archaeologists discovered a hoard of copper coins hidden inside a stupa wall at the site. Coins dating to the early 1st millennium CE, over 2,000 years after the city's fall. This suggests that Buddhist monks or pilgrims returned, repurposing the ruins as a sacred site. Long after the script was lost and the baths ran dry, Mohenjo-daro still meant something. Today, its survival is at risk. Groundwater erosion threatens its delicate mud brick foundations. UNESCO has warned that without urgent conservation, the site may collapse within the next decade. So what survives? A city with no rulers, no war, no written laws. A place that chose clean streets over monuments, shared water over conquest, and above all, it chose silence. But not every ancient civilization vanished without a voice. In a buried archive of clay tablets, echoes once thought lost begin to rise. Wives, mothers, daughters, writing across the vast reach of an empire. Long before empires were carved in stone, a different kind of legacy was pressed into clay. Not declarations of kings or laws etched for subjects. These were smaller, softer, private. Letters sent by women, across mountains, across marriages, across time. Around 1900 BCE, in a bustling Assyrian trade colony called Kweneng, modern-day Kultepe in central Turkey, families spread across hundreds of kilometers conducted business through long-distance letters. While the men of Assur drove caravans through Anatolia, a quiet revolution was happening at home. The women were writing back. More than 300 clay tablets, preserved when a fire swept through the settlement around 1830 BCE, offer something extraordinarily rare: the thoughts and voices of ancient women, speaking plainly of trade, emotion, and family strain. Who were these women? How did they learn to write, and why were their voices nearly lost? One name appears again and again: Taram Kubi. She lived in Assur while her husband traded in Kweneng. Her letters are sharp, businesslike, and filled with subtle power. She instructs him to send silver, negotiates textile orders, and manages loans with an ease that leaves no doubt. She wasn't just surviving in a man's world, she was thriving in it. "Why have you not sent me silver?" she demands in one letter. "I have taken out a loan, repay me." There's no flattery, no apology, just the clear voice of a woman running her affairs while holding her husband accountable, across a distance of over 750 miles, 1,200 kilometers. Then there's Zizizi, who wrote from within the colony itself. Her letters are quieter, full of homesickness and logistical coordination. She misses Assur, but holds her place in the network. One day managing trade, the next day navigating relationships. And not all the letters deal with business. A woman named Ishara wrote to her sister Shalima, warning her not to delay her return from Anatolia or risk weakening the family's reputation. In another letter, a woman named Wakurtum is urged by a male associate to improve the quality of the textiles she's producing for the market. These aren't passive women. They're participants in a commercial empire stretching across the Bronze Age Near East. Between 1974 and 1750 BCE, this network thrived. Assyrian merchants, many operating as family units, maintained trade colonies throughout Anatolia. But while men handled caravans, these women handled credit, goods, and even contracts. Some of the clay letters bear personal seals. Others have duplicates, a backup copy just in case. And then for nearly 4,000 years, they vanished from view. The tablets weren't discovered until 1925, and many weren't fully deciphered until the late 20th century. Even now, fewer than half have been translated. But in 2023, that changed. Researchers began applying AI and machine learning to the wedge-shaped cuneiform, software that can now recognize and transliterate ancient Akkadian at a rate no human can match. By 2025, entire archives may be searchable in ways scholars never imagined. So why did it take so long for us to hear these voices? Because the stories we tell about the past often begin with kings, wars, monuments, not with wives writing to husbands, not with sisters reminding each other of family obligations, not with women balancing their emotions with the exchange rates for tin. These letters are a revelation, not because they're dramatic, but because they're ordinary. They show that nearly 4,000 years ago, Assyrian women were literate, assertive, and economically active. And they remind us that power doesn't always shout from a throne. Sometimes it whispers from clay. The archive at Kultepe may be the oldest known collection of female written correspondence in the world, and it was saved not by design, but by disaster, a fire that turned wet clay into stone. They weren't writing for history. They were writing for each other, and somehow we're still listening. Not far from Anatolia, another world was buried, not in fire but in ash, not by letters but in images. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it didn't just bury a city. It froze a moment in time. In that moment stood a mansion unlike any other in Pompeii. Bold, extravagant, and carefully curated. It wasn't a senator's villa or a general's fortress. It was the creation of two freedmen who once served as slaves. The house of the Vettii, originally built in the 2nd century BCE, belonged to Aulus Vettius Conviva and Aulus Vettius Restitutus, likely brothers, or at least former slaves of the same master. By the 1st century CE, they had amassed enough wealth and influence to not only buy freedom, but to transform a modest home into a palace of sensuality, symbolism, and spectacle. Excavated between 1894 and 1896, the house quickly became a touchstone for Roman art. But it wasn't until 2023, after 2 decades of painstaking restoration, that its true depth was fully revealed. 12 fountains now bubble once again in the restored peristyle garden. Perfumed air, once laced with rose and violet, is simulated by researchers studying Roman horticulture and ritual. Replanted flower beds hint at the house's daily sensory richness, a world where art, smell, and water dance together. And then there are the walls. Every room is a canvas. In the entrance hall, the fertility god Priapus is painted with a phallus so exaggerated it outweighs a money bag on a set of scales. For the Romans, this wasn't obscenity. It was prosperity made visible, luck turned literal. Elsewhere, the walls shimmer with myth. In the triclinium, Pentheus is torn apart by the Maenads. In another room, Dirce is tied to a bull. Hercules, Achilles, Daedalus, Ariadne all appear, frozen in their moral collapses and divine punishments. Each fresco is calculated, not random. This was a language of power speaking through paint. But what were the Vettii trying to say? Their guests would have recognized the iconography. These weren't just myths, they were social messages. Strength, indulgence, revenge, fertility, divine favor. To those who dined here, the message was clear. The Vettii weren't born into status. They claimed it and did so loudly. Yet tucked in the margins of the house is another room. Smaller, darker, and more intimate. On its walls, erotic scenes unfold with startling candor. Couples entwined, actors preparing for scenes of staged desire. One painted sign advertises the services of Eutychus, a Greek woman of pleasant manners, available for hire. Scholars believe this may have been a private brothel room, carefully woven into the domestic layout, not separate, but part of the house's identity. What kind of home was this? A villa, a business, a statement? The restoration, completed in 2023, used cutting-edge technology, laser cleaning, ultraviolet scanning, and pigment reconstruction to strip away over a century of wax and varnish. These earlier coatings, meant to protect, had dulled the colors and hidden details. Now restored frescoes blaze with crimson, cobalt, and gold. For the first time in modern memory, the walls speak clearly again. And they tell us this: Rome's social ladder wasn't unbreakable. The Vettii had once been slaves. By the time Vesuvius erupted, they were among the city's elite, wine merchants, patrons of religion, and hosts to the powerful. But instead of mimicking the aristocracy, they rewrote the rules of prestige, decorating their home not with restraint but with audacity. So how do you display ambition when you weren't born into it? How do you proclaim wealth in a world that remembers your chains? Maybe you build a house like this. Myth on every wall, desire in every corridor, fountains singing your arrival. Pompeii fell in hours. Ash sealed the house in darkness for nearly 1,800 years, and yet today its message feels louder than ever. But far from Italy, on the Korean peninsula, another kind of status symbol was forged, not in paint or fresco, but in gold shaped like trees and horns. Beneath the tumuli of Gyeongju, in tombs shaped like gentle hills, archaeologists found gold shaped like life, crowns with branches like antlers, others like trees reaching upward, splitting and flowering in metal, and each glittered with pendants of jade, curved like commas, gogok they're called, smooth as river pebbles, meant to catch the light, or perhaps the spirit. The Silla kingdom, which thrived from 57 BCE to 935 CE, left few written records, but its royal graves spoke in another language, one of opulence, symbolism, and silence. The most lavish of these, the Gyeomgwancheong tomb of the Gold Crown, discovered in 1921, dates to the 5th or 6th century CE. Inside were weapons, mirrors, a golden belt, horse trappings, and the crown itself, tall and branching, as if grown rather than forged. Who wore it? No name survives. But whoever they were buried not merely with treasure, but with a world rebuilt in miniature, as if the afterlife required a full royal retinue. Recent studies have deepened the mystery. In May 2025, archaeologists revealed a newly discovered Silla crown, not found in Gyeomgwancheong, but in another royal tomb. This one shimmered with beetle wing inlays, catching light in hues of green and blue. It was iridescent, delicate, and unlike anything previously seen in Korean goldwork. Nature was no longer just echoed in shape, but captured in living color, using organic materials that seemed to pulse with life even centuries later. But what were these crowns really? Not battle gear, not coronation trophies. They were not meant to be seen by the living at all. Each was buried in tombs under mounds, hidden for eternity. Scholars now believe the crown's strange shapes, tree-like projections and antlers, aren't just decoration, but symbols drawn from shamanistic cosmology. Across the Eurasian continent, from Scythia to Siberia, the world tree was seen as a cosmic axis, connecting earth, sky, and spirit. Could these crowns have represented that axis, a passage for the king's soul? The construction supports this theory. Many crowns were assembled in 3 distinct layers: a close-fitting cap, an open-work band, and hanging pendants. The intricate gold filigree and granulation techniques bear striking resemblance to Etruscan and Persian craftsmanship, suggesting Silla was no isolated kingdom, but part of vast exchange networks stretching across ancient Eurasia. And in death, everything was ritual. Excavations at the Dongung Palace site in 2025 uncovered gold leaf, incense tools and crystal necklaces placed in tombs alongside dog sacrifices, tokens for a journey beyond. Yet the meaning still resists us. Why were the crowns buried with the dead rather than passed down? Were they symbols of divine right, or tools of spiritual ascent? And why shape them like trees if not to imply life after death, or rebirth? Maybe the crowns were never meant to be worn at all. Maybe they were masks for the soul. And as we leave the green tombs of Silla behind, we turn to a kingdom not of gold but of stone, once vast, once thriving, and then forgotten. It had no palace, no written record, no monument bearing its name. Yet for centuries, Kweneng was home, a living, breathing mountain city built in stone. Just 18 miles, 30 kilometers, south of Johannesburg, South Africa, its ruins lay buried beneath savanna grass and thorny bush for nearly 200 years. The land gave away nothing, no mounds, no temples, no whispers passed down. Then in 2015, a beam of light pierced the silence. Using airborne LiDAR scanning, archaeologists uncovered a sprawling city, over 800 stone-walled compounds spanning 8 square miles, 20 square kilometers. This was no forgotten village. It was an urban center, once home to between 5,000 and 10,000 people, that thrived from the 15th century CE until the early 1800s. How could something so vast, so organized, have disappeared so completely? The city's architecture was built in circles. Each homestead surrounded a central kraal, a cattle enclosure, which formed the heart of the household. These compounds linked together by narrow passageways, forming dense clusters that reflected kinship ties and social roles. Inside the compounds, traces of daily life linger: worn grinding stones, fire pits, and the faint outlines of circular homes. Not debris, but quiet evidence of a once thriving order, and these were no signs of neglect. In Kweneng, refuse was a badge of wealth. The larger the midden, the more feasts you hosted, and the higher your standing in the community. There were no palaces, no engraved laws. Leadership wasn't imposed from above, but likely rotated among elder councils or respected lineages. Rituals and cattle wealth anchored the city's cohesion. Power lived in practice, not in stone. Without major rivers nearby, Kweneng's people mastered life on the Highveld, sustaining cattle, crops, and communal infrastructure through deep knowledge of seasonal rhythms and semi-arid ecology. Here, survival was not luck. It was knowledge, passed hand to hand. Why build a city without kings? And how did such a network govern itself without collapsing? Kweneng didn't fall in war. It didn't burn in fire. By around 1825 CE, it was simply abandoned. Only one compound shows evidence of flames. The rest were left orderly. Pottery, tools, even valuables still in place. It appears the people walked away, perhaps under threat from the growing upheaval of the Mummified, a wave of migrations and conflict that reshaped southern Africa in the early 19th century. Maybe they thought they'd return, but no one ever did. And strangely, the memory left with them. The city was not just lost physically, but culturally. Not even Swana oral traditions mention its name. For a place so vast, so full of life, how could its story vanish so completely? Was it simply forgotten, or deliberately erased? The land grew quiet. Trees crept in. The city became invisible. Then came the aerial surveys, revealing outlines no eye had seen for centuries. A vanished city began to reappear. Stone walls, winding paths, cattle enclosures. A quiet civilization redrawn structure by structure. But the questions remain. What bound this city together in such harmony? What stories were told beneath its stars among those stone circles? And when they left, was it need or something more sacred? Kweneng offers no scrolls, no epics, no statues to speak for it. Its voice comes in stone and shadow, quiet, precise, and deeply human. It reminds us that urban life doesn't always need empire to endure. It only needs purpose. And it raises a final question. How many cities like this are still out there, unseen, unnamed, erased by time, waiting to be found again in light? Now we follow the stones even deeper into the past, to the Bronze Age deserts of the UAE, where dozens of ancient circles align with the sun. They left no script, no faces carved in stone, only circles, silent, enduring, scattered like echoes across the desert foothills. At the edge of the Jebel Hafit mountain range in what is now the United Arab Emirates, a cemetery sprawls across the gravel plains. Over 300 circular tombs rise from the rock, low, beehive-shaped structures made from flat limestone slabs. There are no inscriptions, no icons, and yet they speak of something profound. These are not recent discoveries, but only in the last decade have researchers begun to see them clearly, not as isolated graves, but as part of a Bronze Age mortuary landscape that once stretched across southeastern Arabia, dating from roughly 3,200 to 2,500 BCE. Built directly on bare bedrock, the tombs seem to declare permanence. There are no foundations, no concealment. The dead were meant to rest in full view, on high ground, in rings of stone, above a desert that was once more alive than it looks today. Who are they burying, and why in circles? Some tombs are simple, just a single chamber sealed by a ring of stones. Others are more elaborate, with multiple chambers and double-wall construction. This variation suggests hierarchy or memory stratified across generations. But there are no royal markers here, no names, only patterns. Recent surveys, extending beyond Hafit to nearby Bisya and into Oman, have revealed thousands of these monuments, ranging from small cairns to monumental towers. In some tombs, archaeologists found imported pottery from Mesopotamia and ancient Iran, showing that this region, though arid and seemingly remote, was already linked into a vast trade network as early as the 3rd millennium BCE. Did these circles mark clan territory? Were they ancestral claims, etched in stone to hold the desert in place? And then, there's the alignment. While no single astronomical theory has been confirmed, some researchers suspect the circular layout of tomb clusters may have tracked solar events, much like other prehistoric monuments around the world. Could these stones have measured the passage of time, anchoring the living to cycles of light and death? Others think their purpose was even more intimate, perhaps not for the dead, but for the living. A space for ritual, for memory, for return. They are not built for defense, not for grandeur. These are not temples. They are circles of presence, quiet and absolute. Strangely, like many of the sites in this region, the tombs fell out of use by 2500 BCE, just as the climate grew harsher and people moved inland. What remained was not a city, nor a ruin, just these circles, scattered like stars across the earth, watching time slip by. No texts explain them, no myths preserve them. Only the stones remain, as if the act of building them was itself the story. And maybe it was. We've walked through forgotten cities, circled tombs of stone, and stood before crowns no one dares explain. Not myths, not fables, but choices made by hands long gone. These weren't accidents of time. They were built to be seen, to survive the silence, to outlast forgetting. From crocodiles laid out like offerings, to a city without words, to letters buried in dust, each artifact whispered something different, and yet together they ask the same thing. How much have we lost? The past doesn't vanish. It settles, beneath stone, beneath shadow, beneath what we think we know. So if these traces spoke to you, share them. Like the moment, subscribe to follow the next descent. And if you've ever felt history brush close, tell us below. Because memory isn't gone, it's just waiting to be uncovered. Until the next mystery, only on Riddle Me This Mysteries.